Dan Kessler, welcome to this week's Who the Folk podcast. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Lonnie. Really appreciate it.
So, Dan, you are running for office. You are the DFL candidate running for Minnesota House of Representatives District 47B, which is out Chaska, right?
Yeah.
That neighborhood?
Yes, Chaska, and then about half of Chanhassen, half of Victoria, and little bits and pieces of Excelsior.
Okay. So pretty geographically, pretty big district then.
Yeah.
It seems like.
Yeah, I mean, most of it is Chaska, really.
Okay. So I guess for starters, what led you to want to run for office in the first place?
Well, I'm a psychologist. I've been doing the psychologist gig for about 30 years. I'm also a mediator. I used to do in a previous job, family mediation, child support and parenting time sort of thing. But I'm a cognitive behavioral psychologist. And what that means is people come into my office and my job is to help them focus on what they can do to make change in their world. Okay. But folks kept coming in with issues that were more systemic. People were coming in saying, I got a prescription from my doctor, but I can't fill it because I can't afford the prescription. And they had health insurance and they had a job. And so I can't turn to that person and say, well, what can you do to change that situation? Because they're doing everything that they should be doing. And that's a systemic issue that needs to be fixed at a systemic level. And that means going over to St. Paul, because that's where they make all the rules.
It's got to be so hard for you as a physician watching these people who are in your care, who are seemingly doing everything correct to take care of themselves, to get their prescriptions filled, to do what they need to do to be healthy and to stay healthy or to get healthy, only to have the system stand in their way.
Yeah. And that was incredibly frustrating. I will say that still a week doesn't go by that someone doesn't tell me that they don't go see their primary care doctor because they can't afford it, or they're not getting physical therapy because their insurance won't cover it, or it'll cover it, but their deductible is $5,000 and their copay is $40 a week and they can't afford that and they've got a job. I talked to a fella who has multiple medical issues, has a master's degree, can't really work a full-time job anymore because he's somewhat unpredictable. So he does taxes for people and he drives Uber and Lyft. He makes like $35,000 a year. He could qualify. He's also insulin dependent. And this guy could qualify for Medicaid if he just stopped working. But he doesn't want to stop working. He wants to continue to contribute. And we sat down and he said that his medical bills between insulin and doctor visits are a little over $10,000 a year. And he's making $35,000 working. He's far better off financially if he just stops working, but he doesn't want to do that because that doesn't fit his ethic. So that's the guy we need to do something about. And what makes me crazy about that situation is that we had everyone in the House of Representatives, pretty much everyone in the House of Representatives and the Senate in Minnesota agreed that insulin was too high. The cost was too high, and it took them 3 years to come to conclusion, to come to an agreement on this. And that lack of bipartisanship is really troubling me.
So it's a heartbreaking story of the person you know. And what do you see as the role you can play in helping to bridge some of the partisanship gap?
Well, what a mediator does is work with people to start with, what are their goals that they want to achieve? So often when people come into mediation, they have an idea of what they want. I want, if it's for example, if it's a family mediation, I want to pay this much in child support, or I want to have my kids this many, whatever. And what a mediator tries to do is move people off of, I want this, to what are the real goals they have. So we have to start with the real goals. And the goal would, in this case, would have been to make insulin affordable for everyone. And if we can agree on that goal, then we start kind of moving away from, we need to do it this way, to how can we make that happen? Now I'll admit, it's a real challenging atmosphere right now in our political system. People are very stuck on their positions. People are very stuck on what their party wants, and getting legislators to move away from party and move towards people and what's important is going to be very difficult. I'm not going to say I can do it. I don't know that anyone can do it, but I'd really like to try to try to bridge some of those gaps. And perhaps that's naive on my part, but really like to try to bridge some of those gaps between the parties to bring people together, because Minnesota, especially my district, is a pretty middle of the road district. People aren't living on the extremes necessarily, and I don't think I think legislation necessarily should be.
You mentioned your district, the incumbent who you're running against. I mean, the margin is so small. It's taking now. I spoke too soon. I can't quite do it that fast in my head, but if my quick math is correct, 117 votes.
117 votes. 116 if you count my now 21-year-old's vote that didn't get counted because he put the wrong number on the ballot.
Oh
I've
no!
I've got to talk with him about that. He will fill out. He's up in North Dakota right now. He's got his absentee ballot. I don't think he's filled it out yet. He has assured me that he will fill it out correctly this time so that it counts. But yes, it was 117 vote margin, right around a half a percentage point. I think there was something around 22,000 votes cast in that election. So it's a super tight district.
I think it's interesting that I think people tend to look at the farther you get out from the Twin Cities, the more conservative it tends to get. And I think that is probably true, but I sort of thought that partisanship line sort of, you were going to be in a more safely Republican seat, if you will, than it turns out you are.
Oh, well, it was like that. I think it was safe enough Republican wise that this district didn't field a candidate in 2010, 2012, 2014 on the Democratic side. We did field a candidate in 2016, but a very late entry into the race. 2018 was the first time we had a really strong candidate who raised significant amount of money, got a large volunteer base together, and really ran hard. And what happened between 2008 and 2018 in especially Chaska and Chanhassen, the more eastern sections of this district, is a tremendous amount of growth. Our school district is the most rapidly growing school district in the state. And between the growth and the change in this district, all of a sudden now it moved from a fairly deep red district to I think this is a very bright purple district with a lot of folks who sort of are right in that middle area, who will lean a bit right on some issues and lean a bit left on other issues. And then we have a growing base of people who are more progressive, who live here. So this district has changed dramatically, and I'm really looking forward to this election because of it.
So has anybody made the crack or quip or joke, if you will, that you should have your head examined if you wanted to run for office?
They have a few people have implied that perhaps as a psychologist, I might wish to look inward in making this decision. And I'm really lucky in that my wife comes from a very politically active family, and she was much more aware of what this was going to be like than I was, and has been a terrific support for me. And along the way, a few times I've been like, honey, I just didn't expect it to be quite this intense. And she looked at me and she's like, I knew. We're good. It's been terrific. But she said it in that really loving, caring way. And having a spouse that's supportive is really terrific. And has helped me to be able to really dedicate myself to the time necessary to both run a psychology practice or be involved in a psychology practice and do essentially a full-time job of being a candidate. which has been great fun and a great challenge as well.
So one of the weird things, I'm always interested in hearing candidates really at any level talk about this is, I mean, 2020 is just bananas.
Oh,
I think puts it kindly.
yeah.
And when you decided to run, you told me about a year or so ago was when you had
Mm-hmm.
really, you had filed, you were going to be a candidate, you started moving forward. There was no pandemic, there was no coronavirus. You could do the door to door nitty gritty retail politics that I think you probably had looked forward to when you
Oh,
initially committed to doing this.
absolutely.
How hard has this last 6-7 months been when you're basically a shut in by
Yeah.
necessity?
Yeah, I don't know that it's been any more or less as far as hours go. But when I jumped into this, folks I knew were like, you're going to wear out 3 pair of sneakers walking from door to door. You're going to knock on, X thousand doors. You're going to meet X thousand people. You're really going to be out there, like, expect that. And I was ready for that and psyched for that. And that was more than a year ago. I made the formal decision to run, I would say, right around this time last year, maybe a few weeks earlier. And I just did not expect that I would be spending most all of my time talking to people on the phone, sending text messages, having town halls by Zoom. Um, Even this interview today, I suspect in a different world would be conducted together, in the same room at a studio.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm sitting in my oldest kid's bedroom now that he's off to college, or my second oldest kid's bedroom, oldest boy's bedroom while he's off to college, and you're at home, and it's a very different world than I expected it to be when I made that decision. Um, but it's been a challenging year for everyone, and I certainly can't complain. I'm healthy. I've got a good job I've been able to do. My wife's in IT. She's been able to do her job. My kids have been able to attend school online and are doing well. I as much as I'd love to complain about how tough it's been to campaign, the reality is that compared to so many others right now, we're doing okay, and I'm really thankful for that.
Well, that's great. I mean, we all are. We're all thankful, and we're all facing different challenges, I think, as we go through this year, which is
Hmm.
obviously, just ridiculous. I mean, this is the everything that could go wrong has gone wrong sort of year.
Hmm.
And, I think it's been terrible for so many people, who have lost jobs, who have had health challenges through all of this. It's been really hard. So fortunately for you and your family, you're all okay.
Yeah.
I mean, as okay as 2020 can
Yeah.
be.
And what this pandemic has done is shined such a bright light on the problems that existed. I mentioned earlier the reason I decided to run was large part because of healthcare affordability issues. But this pandemic, it just shined a bright light on that. We see people of color infected and dying at much higher levels, and people who have less access to medicine and medical care are much more greatly impacted. People who can't afford their health care because they lost their job and their health care was tied to their job. I mean, this pandemic, if anything, has just spotlighted the disparities in our world that have really created the environment that made me want to get involved in politics in the first place. I really like to stay focused on our local Minnesota races, but I have to admit that the national political climate had something to do with increasing my involvement in politics. I've always been involved. I've always been, I've been a delegate to DFL conventions and have been really excited about politics. But I got involved and wanted to run because of the changes I wanted to see. That again were spotlighted by the pandemic, but were present all along. And the stuff I saw in my office, I got frustrated with things I couldn't fix. I got frustrated with people with our schools not being properly funded, because we keep having to go to taxpayers for referendums rather than fully funding our schools at the state level. And again, that's the sort of thing that impacts me and my kids, and can be changed not by me in my office as a psychologist, but by the folks over in St. Paul who are making decisions about how to fund school systems around the country or around the state, and how to reduce those disparities that we see between very wealthy school systems, sort of decently off, but not as wealthy school systems like the one that my kids go to here, and those school systems that are struggling financially. And that can be changed again at the state level.
Dan and I talk more about schools and other opportunities to effect change if elected. But first, a message from our sponsor. This podcast is sponsored by Downtown Dogs Daycare and Boarding, where furry family members play and stay by the hour, day, week, or longer. And Dogs Day Out, featuring 7 socially distanced dog bathtubs and the Zen Den for Shire pups. Located near the Minneapolis Farmers Market and offering curbside fetch and retrieve upon request. All breeds, sizes, and ages are welcome. Visit us at dtdogs.com and dogsdaympls.com. And as somebody who now is a parent with kids in the school district, in a Minnesota school district, and having spent some time covering a Minnesota school district, the elected officials complaining about the disparities when it comes to funding schools this is not, I know you know this, but this is not a new thing. These are issues that school board members have had, that city council members have had, certainly that state legislators have had, talking to legislators of both parties in the district I used to cover. It's been a real struggle that nobody, for some reason, has been able to get their hands around. I don't know whether it's political will or what, but these are not new problems that you bring up.
No. And in my district, they're especially spotlighted because, as I mentioned, most rapidly growing school district in the state. But when the school system went to the taxpayers here and said, hey, we want to pass a referendum, we need to open a new school, we need to bring our buses in-house, a few other things, the sort of anti-public school folks came out in droves, made some accusations about the school system's equity program that were just plain out of line, to use some scare tactics and some fear mongering, and managed to get those referendums killed off. And as a result, and I've got 2 older kids.
Welcome to this week's Who the Folk podcast, sponsored by Downtown Dogs, Twin Cities' largest dog.
And if we don't change things back or get more funding,
I'm Lonnie
for our
Goldsmith,
schools,
the editor of TCG.
My kids, my younger 2 kids.
This week we talk with Dan Kessler, a psychologist in Chaska, who is in the home stretch of his race to represent Minnesota House District 47B.
We laid off.
Dan and I talk about what drove him to run for office, the Jewish values at play in his candidacy, and what difference he thinks he can make in St. Paul on this week's Who the Folk podcast.
Young teacher, class sizes.
And before we get started, a quick reminder
that's not good for
that
our kids.
TCG folk will not be endorsing
the argument to folks
in this or any race. We are happy to interview any Jewish candidate or office holder on the Who the Folk podcast. If you're interested, please email me at editor@tcgfolk.com.
Some anti-public school organizations out there that really want to interfere with that. And again, that's something that I hope I can impact at the State House. But I guess we'll find out when I get there.
No, absolutely. And, it's an interesting point you brought up. It's one that's been made here in the district I'm in with referendums that have been attempted and have passed over the course of the last, I'm losing track of time, maybe last 7 or 8 years. There's been a couple different referendums, but, there is a lot of older people in the district whose children are graduates, maybe their grandchildren even are graduates. And the point has always been made that, when the schools are good, property values stay good. They stay strong. It becomes a bit of an economic engine for the whole district.
Yeah, I mean, I have a buddy who lives out in Seattle in an exceptional school district, and he went to sell his house, and he went to his realtor, and he's like, "What do I need to do to get this house in shape?" And the realtor looked at him and said, "Nothing. Just list the schools, and we'll post, and we'll advertise your home, and it'll sell because everyone wants to live in the school district." And that does drive the local economy powerfully. And yes, it drives property values, but even when we're talking beyond property values, when people want to live in an area, that area booms. That the downtown of that area does better. The entire community does better and becomes stronger when the schools are good. So whether you have children in school or not, and I do hear this on the phones because I'm talking to the other people on the phones, and I'll hear from older folks who's like, "Yeah, my kids aren't in school anymore. My kids are graduated. I got grandkids, but I want this to be a good place to live. I want the quality of life in Chaska and Chanhassen to be strong. And a good school is going to make for a better quality of life for me, even as a 72-year-old retired person with no children in school." And I'm really heartened when I hear that from people because I know it's true.
Right. Right. It's true, but there's it becomes important to make sure that other people get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
As well. So Dan, let me ask, how do your Jewish values play into both your personal politics and sort of what you look for in yourself as a candidate and talking to other people?
In my jacket pocket, that I'm not wearing right now, it's in the home. Not, of course, not in person wearing a suit.
Right.
In my jacket pocket of my favorite suit, I carry a shard of broken glass with me that was one of a number of shards that were handed out on Rosh Hashanah when we all came into High Holy Day services, and we were all handed these shards of broken glass, and asked to hold on to them and return them at the end of Yom Kippur to make a mosaic out of them, to make art out of them. And I took a few extra that I kept one of. I'll be honest, sorry to our Shir Tikva art folks for keeping one or two of those shards. But the idea there is that they had us, carry this with you during the High Holy Days. Think about the ways we want to fix our broken world. And I love that idea so much that I carry that with me. Because part of our responsibility as Jews is to recognize the damage in the world and to do what we can to fix it at every turn. And I like to have that reminder with me, that that's my first responsibility after being a dad and a husband, sorry. But my first responsibility as a Jew is to be involved in repairing the world and involved in Tikkun Olam. And that is certainly a part of what got me motivated to do this. And something that I try to remember as much as I can, especially in those times when this whole process gets frustrating. That there's a reason for this. There's a reason for this kind of involvement.
That's so cool, and I have no doubt that Rabbi Latz will be okay with you, nicking one small shard of glass. I hope it didn't ruin any mosaic that was being put together there.
They had many of them. I felt comfortable with it. And I did turn back in a couple too.
Okay. So then you're okay.
So I'm okay. I followed the rules on some of them, but I keep one and it's yellow and I really like it. And sometimes when I've been in meetings and a little nervous, I even use it as a bit of a fidget to remind me, because it's they managed to get this broken glass. It must have been art glass. It's not sharp. It doesn't injure, but it's nice to kind of hold on to, very tactile. So, but it certainly is a lovely reminder of what we're all supposed to be doing.
Well, that's very cool. And that's such a lovely way to tie your Judaism into your candidacy.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of the ethics and the ethos that you stand for mm-hmm. in this run for office. Well, Dan, last couple questions, and we will let you get back onto your campaigning duties here. As you and I are talking, we are less than a month out. We are by the time this airs, there will be 22 22 days left, 23 days left. And obviously here in Minnesota, voting has been underway for quite a while. It's just the deadline for when to turn your vote in on election day is coming upon us in 3 weeks. So if you haven't voted, here's your public service announcement. Go vote. mnvotes.org is how to, find that out. So last couple questions. What is your favorite Jewish food?
My family is vegan, and which is terrific because if you go to Israel, you can eat really well as a vegan. And I know this is just almost too cliche, but I love a good falafel.
As soon as you said cliche, I knew what you were going to say.
I really love just a really nice falafel. And we certainly we buy the bulk chickpeas, so we get the big gallon tub of tahini that you can get at like the restaurant supply store. So
oh, you don't mess around then.
We do not mess around in my household at all. So with apologies for the cliche and the stereotype, I love a good falafel.
No, not at all. Do you make your own pita?
I would. My wife will do that.
Okay.
We do both cook, but I don't bake, and okay, she does a lovely pita, and a really nice challah on Shabbat, and so that's a big part of our tradition there.
Well, that is awesome. And what is your favorite Jewish holiday?
Oh gosh, I love the family involvement of Pesach, but I will say that as I've gotten older, and maybe just it just passed, I really find Yom Kippur, even this year doing Yom Kippur from a distance and watching the live stream on my television, and praying in my living room instead of in the giant sanctuary that we borrowed from the church. I just really find a lot of meaning in that holiday, and just really it's become my favorite over the last few years, especially.
Well, excellent. Well, Dan Kessler, thank you so much for joining me this week. Best of luck to you in House 47B. Election day coming up November 3rd. We will have a recap of how the local Jewish candidates did on TC Jewfolk on the next morning. So we will be checking in with you on election day evening. But thank you for joining us, and best of luck down the stretch in the stretch run here.
Thanks, Lonnie. I really appreciate it. Thanks for giving me a chance to come on today and chat a little bit with folks.
You got it. Good luck.
All right.
The Who the Folk podcast is part of the Jewfolk Podcast Network, a product of Jewfolk Inc. Please subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you have suggestions for other podcast guests, please email them to me at editor@tcjewfolk.com. For our other shows, check out tcjewfolk.com/podcast. Thanks again to our sponsor this week, Dog's Day Out, a new do-it-yourself dog wash and full-service bathing and grooming salon.